Recording in progress.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Investments. Today is Wednesday, March 11th, and the time is 9:03 a.m. First item is our Pledge of Allegiance. Patrick, can you lead us?
Flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next is our staff information.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keogh. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual and in-person meeting. So we'll do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Ms. Ginsburg? Here. Ms. Mead? Here. Chair Kehoe?
Here.
Mr. Fay?
Present.
Ms. Martin? Here. Mr. Gatto?
Here.
Ms. Martinez? Mr. Jones?
Present.
And Ms. Langton? Present. Okay, trustees, please use your raise your hand option to be placed in the queue, and then we proceed with the agenda.
Great. Thank you. Our procedures for teleconference attendance?
Nothing today.
Nothing today. So first item of business will be the approval of the regular meeting of February 11th. I'll need a motion for the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
Okay, Ms. Ginsburg?
Yes.
Ms. Mead?
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Fay?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Gatto? Mr. Jones?
Aye.
And Ms. Langton? Aye. Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our next item is our public comment. Have we received any requests to speak? Okay, hearing no public comments, we'll move on to our executive updates. First with our CIO's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, trustees. Full agenda. I'll try to be efficient, but just maybe this is some insight into how my mind works. In the Real Assets Committee, Cheryl said, we're beating our benchmark in all periods. And so that's going on a loop in my mind, we're beating all benchmarks in all time periods. So thank you, Cheryl, for putting a smile on my face. So let's begin on slide 4. So the CIO report is a flash report with best available information in it. And so this report is posted in March. It has month-end February information in it for major capital markets. Month-end February is relevant as that's what we use for our benchmarks, and it's an indication of the trajectory of the portfolio before we have performance information for February. In this report, there is actual fund performance information for January. So we're talking about March, February, now January, and that recognizes that some assets only price quarterly, but for those assets that price quarterly, i.e. in December, there's significant detail in the quarterly performance report, which is also part of this package that the team will go into much greater detail later on during the meeting. So the CIO report may be 20 pages. The quarterly performance book is 160 pages, just because we have better information for that. So that was a bit of a detail or tangent, but why I paused on this page is, and talked about months, other than that to prove that I know the calendar, that the bullet point that talks under market themes about geopolitical uncertainty. And so nowhere in this report is the concept or discussion of the conflict in Iran. And I know that there was some discussion about that in the Real Assets Committee. Those numbers are not reflected in this report. It's obviously an important topic for multiple reasons that impact every person in the region, in the world. And maybe slide 9 is a good way to frame our discussion based upon that important topic. So slide 9, this shows the LACERA fund, and it's similar for OPEB. Both are broadly diversified across 5 functional categories. Those are growth, credit, real assets, risk reduction, and overlay and hedges. So that functional framework is designed by the board to optimize return, risk and liquidity across a variety of market regimes. Those regimes can be high and low economic growth, high and low inflation, all the combinations therein of those different states. And our functional framework is expressed through public and private markets, investments focused on yield and others focused on capital appreciation, active strategies, passive strategies, all with various levels of risk. So going back to the conflict in Iran, as of today, we're not sure of the portfolio implications from that conflict. We are, however, and maybe I'll double underscore the however, positioned to weather this war and other incidents, other material incidents. And that is a result of the asset allocation that is expressed through the functional framework that we've had in place since 2019. That functional framework instills in us investment discipline. It's honed through time and experience, both of the board and staff. It's codified in our investment beliefs. And a proof point of that is the chart on the top of the page. So the bar graph details monthly returns by numeric percentage intervals for a 10-year period, such that there are, in those various bar graphs, there are 120 periods. So the count, if you go back 120 months ago, began before Brexit, and a lot has happened since. There's been a global pandemic, Russia, Ukraine, various trade disputes, high inflation, zero interest rate policy. There was a question in the Real Assets Committee about AI. That was before AI was, the topic of every discussion. And notwithstanding all those incidents that we didn't know were going to happen, our asset allocation has worked. It's delivered for us. The skew of this chart is positive. So our largest bar is the 1 to 2% monthly return. And we've been positive 78 of the 120 months going back over the last 10 years. That's more than, or that's about 2/3. There's a very tight distribution from kind of the 0 to 3% is where most of the returns are. That's fabulous, considering that we are cash flow negative. We're a mature plan. The actuaries will talk about that later this morning. And maybe the table below that chart further emphasizes our results. Over this 10-year period, our annualized returns are 9.2%. So if you look at the 10-year column, total fund, 9.2%, that's greater than the policy benchmark of 8.8% and the actuarial hurdle of 7%. And we've done all this, and this is something why we all sit on the board, why we all come to work each and every day, is that we've paid over $37 billion in benefit payments to LACERA members over this 10-year period. I mean, that's something that everyone here deserves an applause for. So we've been positive more than not 2/3 of the time, and we've paid $37 billion of benefits against all this uncertainty that's happened in the markets. Moreover, we've done this with a focus on risk and liquidity management. So let's go back to slide 8. Thank you. So going to January, January was a very good month from the perspective of returns. The fund was up 1.6% net. AUM is $90.8 billion, a high watermark. Love high watermarks. Cash is and cash equivalents are about $1.1 billion. And a chart that I don't talk about enough is the top middle growth of $1, where that compares the growth of $1 invested in the fund 5 years ago versus our benchmark and our actuarial hurdle. That's at $1.51. That $1.51, so if you look at the gap over the performance of our policy benchmark, that equates to $5 billion of excess returns for the fund over this 5-year period. $5 billion is a lot of money. That pays a heck of a lot of benefit payments. Let's turn to slide 13. So OPEB also hit a high water mark in January of $5.8 billion. with a net return of 1.8% for the month. OPEB is a smaller plan, and the growth of $1 chart in the top middle, once again, where it compares the performance of OPEB compared to its policy and actuarial hurdle, it's the white space isn't as great, also because this was largely a passive implementation, but the performance of OPEB compared to its policy benchmark over the last 5 years is an extra $100 million of return. So once again, $5 billion, $100 million, that's material. And that's something that once again goes to our mission, to our members. And we've done this in sight of all this market uncertainty. And I'll finish on slide 19, where I'll highlight two things. First is I'm very excited about entering the second year of our fellowship program. We are launching the search for 2 additional fellows to join both Jesse and Albert. I would say that Albert and Jesse have set a very high standard. So I'm very excited to have them joined by 2 additional peers. And the second thing I'll highlight relates to the Board of Investments offsite. The planning is in full swing. It will be September 15th and 16th in Long Beach. The focus of it will be our strategic framework, allocator to best-in-class investor, and a prospective refresh of that. There will be several surveys that will be going to the board over the next month. Hopefully, by the time I am here in front of you next month, one will be from Makita and one will be from staff. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to pause for questions.
Thank you. Excellent presentation and great news. 96.6 billion assets under management. We're getting close to that $100 billion mark. So that'll be great for us. Any questions from the board? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Okay. I believe that brings us to our member spotlight.
That does. Good morning, trustees. So the member spotlight is a way for LACERA to recognize the public servants that care for constituents of Los Angeles County. It's also an opportunity for all of us to reflect on why we do what we do as we empower them to enjoy a healthy and secure retirement. So this month, we are recognizing Vivian Huang. Vivian is getting ready to retire after 34 years of service to LA County. She started out as an intermediate clerk and is now at the assessor's office and is now with the Department of Public Works as a program manager 1. Her hero was her mother, who immigrated to the United States, didn't speak English at all, and raised 2 daughters that served the county. Her sister also served the county, and I understand she's also retired recently. So she's looking forward to getting back to running, caring for some fruit trees, spending more time with a ragdoll cat, Moon. I'm not sure what a ragdoll cat is. I'll have to look that up. But Ms. Hong, we thank you very much for your service. We appreciate you.
Thank you. For those of us who sit on both boards, I feel like I know her personally. Okay, moving on to the CEO's report.
Yes, good morning, Chair Kehoe. Good morning, trustees. A few updates on the CEO report. First, you'll hear an actuarial evaluation from Ted and the Milliman Group. If we can go to slide 4, please. At a high level, certainly not under the hood report like our CIO report and some of the reports from our investment team, but this is kind of a high level report we provide operationally on our key metrics. And just to highlight a couple of things that will change, we will add the funded ratio, and Ted and the team will provide some good news in terms of that trajectory in terms of our funded ratio, which is a really good member metric in terms of highlighting the health of our portfolio. Also want to provide an update on a couple of save the dates. So follow up with John on some save the dates. April 20th is our JOGC meeting. A couple of items that we're going to be discussing there is our divisional, or not our divisional, our budget, overall budget. We've just concluded our divisional budget meetings, and the team is hard at work on finalizing the budget documents to provide to all of you on April 20th. We also have, and we've talked about the building project, reclassifying the building 300 North from a investment asset to a capital asset. So that report will be in front of the JOGC on April 20th as well. So certainly encourage attendance to that meeting. And then we have our Board of Retirement offsite on May 18th and 19th. Always encourage BOI members. I know we have some members that are members of both, but encourage folks to attend as it relates to getting at least a sense of what's going on operationally on the BOR side and administratively. We continue to make progress on our recruitment efforts. John mentioned the fellowship program. We're also just released our internship program vacancy, so that's on our website. Certainly encourage all to apply. We have several opportunities throughout the organization, and it's a program that we're building up, and we're proud to kind of see where we're at today, and certainly has some success on the interns that have come through LACERA over the last several years. And then lastly, just want to acknowledge one of our executives, Laura Guglielmo, retires. We provided a nice reception in the BOR meeting last week, but certainly want to highlight Laura's last BOI meeting today and wish her well as she transitions into retirement at the end of this month. That concludes my comments, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the CEO? Hearing none. Okay, we're going to change up the agenda just slightly. We're going to be going into closed session and getting all the closed session items off the table. Then we'll be coming back to handle the non-consent actuarial valuation. That gets all of our action items out of the way, and then we'll continue on to the reports. So let's go ahead and move us into closed session. And we're going to be hearing the private equity updates first.
I'm gonna pull number 3. I don't know if they were already planning to talk.
Perfect, I'll ask who is going to pull.
And Sean.
Mhm.
Love that you asked for that checklist on the right. They keep that checklist. Oh my God, just so helpful. I told them that too. They said it was your idea. Yeah.
on those? Hearing none, we will go back
Recording
to
in
our regularly
progress.
scheduled program. And as soon as our staff is set up, we can move on to item 7, our non-consent item, which is our 2025 actuarial evaluation of retirement benefits. And no rush whenever you guys are set up.
Nick, I'll get you water.
Oh, Jeffrey's gonna give me some water. Okay. You guys ready? Okay. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and Board of Investment Trustees. My name is Ted Granger. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at LACERA. My team is responsible for coordinating the actuarial consulting services, and as well, we work with internal audit to coordinate the actuarial review services. I'm here to introduce the speakers today and provide some context for the discussion. Sitting immediately to my left is Nick Collier. He's a principal and consulting actuary with Milliman. Next to Nick is Craig Glide. He's also with Milliman, one of our consulting actuaries. And finally, at the end of the table is Brent Bannister. He's with CABMAC. He is a reviewing or auditing actuary for LACERA. I'd like to thank and recognize and thank the investment office team member for running the slides today. I'm not sure.
It's Deb.
Thank you, Deb. So there's a recommendation before the board today. That recommendation is to accept the 2025 actual valuation report for the retirement benefits plan. Also, part of that recommendation is to adopt the employer and employee contribution rates. Now, remember, for this particular cycle, all of the employee rates are updated for both the legacy plan, that's once every 3 years, as well as the PEPRA plan members, that's every year. And of course, we update the employer contributions every year as well. And finally, part of the recommendation is to delegate the authority to staff to work with the county CEO's office and the Board of Supervisors to implement the new recommendations, the new contribution rates that are recommended by Milliman for July 1, 2026. If we go to the next slide, please. So very quickly, in terms of the agenda, I'll provide a couple of more comments. Thank you. I'll kick it over to Milliman to talk about the actuarial evaluation results. And then finally, we'll round it out with CABMAC, who will talk about their review process. If we go to the next slide, please. So just a very, very quick recap. We did talk about the assumptions and the board adopted those assumptions back in January. I did provide a list on this slide just for quick reference. I wanted to also mention that I updated the board verbally last time in terms of the county CEO's office. They provided a verbal support of the assumptions. And I wanted to let the board know that we did receive the letter from the acting CEO. And in fact, again, they did support the assumptions that Milliman provided. I think that's key because the assumptions are obviously inputs that go into the valuation report and help us determine those results. So it's good that Milliman's recommendations were confirmed by CABMAC and also by Chiron at the county. So I think good inputs result in good outputs in terms of this valuation report that we're discussing today. Next slide, please. So very quickly, in terms of the roadmap, obviously we're in March. We're going to talk about the valuation report today. The review of that report will move into May. My team will go to work with the Board of Supervisors, as I mentioned. And then finally, in June, we'll come back to the board with our annual risk assessment report, which I think is also an important report for the board to review sort of midstream or mid-cycle. And then finally, I'd like to share just a quick story. Yesterday, I was on a training class regarding AI for accountants. And this particular trainer input into the tool he was using, I believe he was using Claude as the tool. And I wrote it down. He did a live demo, so I had to write it down. So I hope my notes are accurate. But he said, he typed in the 3 biggest concerns
for accountants who administer pension funds. And this particular tool came back with, number one concern was fraud, paying the right people the right amount. That's key. Number two was risk management. There's a lot of transactions happening at pension funds. There's a lot of inflows, outflows, contributions, investment earnings, benefit payments. As John mentioned, the billions of dollars we pay out. So that's important. And number three was actuarial reporting, ensuring the financial sustainability of the plan. So obviously measuring our liabilities, measuring our funding status, and that's essentially what we're doing today. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Nick to get us going on the valuation.
All right, thanks. We move to the Milliman presentation. Thank you. So moving to the next slide. So first thing, we're just gonna go over big picture, what we're doing here, what the valuation is and why we do it. Then we're gonna review the key results of the valuation. Spoiler alert, they're gonna be very similar and in some cases identical to our estimates we presented to you back in January. The two big factors that affected the results are gonna be the assumptions that we talked about in January, that the new assumptions that are adopted, and also the good investment returns. Basically had effectively offsetting impacts. So there's overall very little change on a lot of the metrics. And Craig's going to go over that in more detail. And lastly, we'll just do a quick look ahead where we might see the LACERA's funding status contribution rates going in the future. So moving to the next slide. So this kind of ties a little bit to what Ted was talking about, but I'm just going to read this because I think this pretty much says it right. So the purpose of the actual evaluation is to determine the level of contributions necessary so that along with the assets already accumulated by the plan, there are sufficient assets to meet the future benefit payments, administration expenses of the plan when they become due. Ultimately, that's your ultimate goal as trustees. And as Ted talked about on actual reporting, the actual evaluation is very important and necessary for LACERA and the BOI to help fulfill their responsibilities as fiduciaries and under the California Government Code and CERL. So moving to the next slide. As like it's a big picture of what we're doing, and I think you're all pretty familiar with this. Starting kind of right to left, ultimately, and Mr. Grable talked about ultimately paying benefits. That's that's what this LACERA is all about, and that's where we need to get to. Obviously, that's a big piece. How do we pay the benefits? We accumulate assets, and on an actual basis, we pre-fund. So ideally, we have all our assets accumulated for individual by the time they're retired, and those assets would pay the benefits. Like most funds, LACERA isn't quite there. That is, the assets accumulated right now are somewhat less than the value of the benefits that have been accumulated. And that's one thing the actual valuation does a comparison of your assets versus your accumulated liabilities, which is called the funded ratio. Second key metric coming out of the evaluation is going to be the contribution rates. And we think, how do we accumulate the pool of assets? Contributions coming in both from the members and from the employers. That gets helped. And if you looked at Lewis's dollar thing, you see investment earnings are a big piece of creating that pool of assets. But when you think about investment earnings, those are subject to the vagaries of the market. The board has little control in the asset allocation, but that's still an unknown. The member contributions, those are fixed in, those are set in statute. So once again, the board has very little discretion there. So ultimately, the real lever that the board has is the employer contribution rate, either increasing or decreasing the contribution rate to keep this equation in balance. And that's the second key finding of the actual evaluation is we recommend the employer contribution rate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig to kind of go over the result of the evaluation in more detail.
Hey, next slide, please. Good morning. So as Nick mentioned, I'm going to dig into the results a little bit more here. Just before I do that, we have this overview of the results page. So I would say if there's one page in our presentation you want to sort of keep as a Cliff Notes version of what we're telling you this morning, this is it. So I'll just go over this at a high level, and then I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit more on my next slides. But starting in the top left, you've heard from Mr. Grable, and Nick mentioned as well, from 2024 to 2025, there was strong investment return. On a fair market value of assets basis, the fund returned about 9.7%. That's compared to the 7% assumed return. So obviously that's in excess. So that's an actuarial gain. And so that's very good, very strong. On the actuarial value of assets basis, we also exceeded 7% at 8.3. As a reminder, the actual value of assets is used in the funding calculations, and it essentially smooths investment gains and losses relative to the assumed 7% return, so that you don't take full recognition in this year for that 9.7. Some of that is deferred for recognition in prior years. So we're recognizing a portion of that this year, and we're also recognizing portions of some of the prior years' gains and losses. And so we get a slightly different return on the actual value of assets, but obviously still ahead of the 7%, which is the key point there. Moving to the right, largely because of that investment return, the funded ratio has increased from 2024 into 2025 by a little over 1% to 82% as of June 30th, 2025. And I think there's been some strong performance since then as well, through February at least. Moving to the far right on the top row, the aggregate employer contribution rate that has increased very slightly from what we had in the 2025 valuation, from 25.61 to 25.70%. That's aggregate for all plans. And as a reminder, the rate that we calculate in this June 30th, 2025 valuation is the rate to be effective July 1, 2026. So there's a year lag there. So it's for the upcoming fiscal year. So a small increase for the employers. On the bottom left, the accrued liability of the plan, this is the value of the liabilities that have been earned by all members for past service. So just everything up to the valuation date. So there's an increase there of almost $5 billion to just a little bit shy of $100 billion on liabilities, 99.7. The valuation assets increased also by a bit more at 5.1 billion. And so the difference between your liability and your assets is the unfunded liability. And so because the assets increased by a bit more than the liabilities did, you had a slight decrease on the unfunded liability to 17.9 billion as of June 30th, 2025.
Craig, a quick question.
Yeah.
Across the top, those three charts, so we had good investment returns, the funded ratio increased. Why did the employer rate go up a little bit? What was the primary driver?
The assumption changes were the main reason for that. And yes, we have some slides later on to get into that, but the assumption changes caused an increase, and some of the other changes, especially the investment return, sort of offset those.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. So looking at the employer contribution rate, a little bit more detail. The employer contribution rate is made up of two components. There's the normal cost, and that's the cost of benefits that are being earned and allocated to the upcoming year. And those are determined separately for each plan. The results we have here is the aggregate for all plans combined. The second portion is the piece to amortize the unfunded liability, and that's the same rate that's spread across all plans. And so you can see in the chart here that the blue bars, which represent the normal cost, we had an increase of about 19 basis points on the aggregate normal cost for the employer. But then we had a 10 basis point decrease on the unfunded liability. Again, with the unfunded liability coming down a little bit compared to last year, we had a decrease in that rate. And so the overall, the 19 basis points up on the normal cost, 10 basis points down on the unfunded liability gives us that 9 basis point increase. There is more detail by each of the plans included in supplemental exhibits to this and to the report, but I'll just stick with the aggregate rates for now. Next slide, please. So breaking that aggregate employer contribution rate down a little bit more, I mentioned different rates by plan and different rates by class of members. So this just gives you a bit more detail on how those rates changed for each class of member. In the aggregate, general members increased slightly, 6 basis points. Slightly higher increase on the safety members, about 44 basis points on the employer contribution rate there. Overall, when those get blended together, we get the 9 basis point increase. What this all means is that we estimate for the fiscal year 2026, there will be employer contributions of about $2.8 billion, which is slightly higher than the estimate for the current fiscal year, the 2025 fiscal year, which we estimated was about $2.64 billion. One of the interesting things on this slide is on the chart on the right, where we show that where the contributions, how they're sort of allocated based on where the membership is. This is the first time that we're projecting that the general G plan, the PEPRA plan, will actually have higher employer contributions than the general D plan. So we're now 12 years into PEPRA. And so we've now we're crossing that threshold now where the PEPRA plans are starting to be that majority share, at least compared to the general D. Next slide, please. Moving over to the member contribution rates. And first we'll talk about the legacy plans. The member contribution rates in the legacy plans, they're determined separately for each plan, and they're determined separately for each member based upon the age at which they joined LACERA. And so these rates are typically, or they are determined by formula. And so they generally only change when assumptions change, the underlying assumptions in the formula. Typically that is investment return, mortality assumptions, and salary increase rates. Since mortality and salary increase assumptions changed in the 2025 valuation, that caused a recalculation of the member rates for legacy members. And so general plans A through C, there's very few members there, but just looking at general plan D, the increases for the members are in the range of about 0.3 to 0.5% of pay. And so overall, the range of contribution rates for members based on their entry ages is about 6.5 to 12.5%. Younger members tend to pay towards the lower end of that. Younger entry age members are at the lower end of that scale, and higher entry age members would be to the higher end. And on safety B, the increase is generally in the range of about 0.1 to 0.4% of pay. And so the overall range of rates for safety B members is about 12.3% to 18%. And again, the younger entry age members would be at the lower end of that scale. The main reason for some of these increases is the change on the merit salary assumption. That's what's driving these rates. General plan E is non-contributory, so that's why there's a blank on general plan E here. And safety plan A, there are no active members in safety plan A anymore, so that's why it's not on this chart. Next slide, please. So looking at the PEPRA member contribution rates. So I mentioned the legacy members, their rates are determined individually by members. The PEPRA plans, all general members in a PEPRA plan, they all pay the same rate, and all safety members in the PEPRA plan, they all pay the same rate. And that rate is equal to 1/2 of the normal cost rate. So they're basically paying for half of the value of their benefits that are being earned in the year. We saw some changes on these this year as well. Now we typically see changes on the PEPRA rates every year because they're paying 1/2 of the normal cost. As the population demographics shifts from year to year, we tend to get sort of small movements in that calculation. In a year when the assumptions change, that difference might be a bit bigger, just reflecting the change in the assumptions. For the general plan G members, we actually saw a slight decrease in the member contribution rate by 8 basis points to 9.22%. But in safety plan C, we saw an increase of 22 basis points to 15.36%. Again, the changes there are driven largely by changes in the assumptions, although the changes on the merit and the retirement assumptions tended to have a slightly different impact for general members than they did for safety members. And so that's why we're really seeing the general going down a little bit, whereas safety is going up. Next slide, please. And so looking at some of the reasons for changes in the funded ratio and the employer contribution rate since last year, or since from 2024 to 2025, focusing first on the funded ratio, we expected the funded ratio would increase about 1% because there's contributions being made to amortize the unfunded liability. The new assumptions and methods did pull that funded ratio down about 0.6%. And then those strong investment returns that we talked about also helped to increase the funded ratio. So overall, it's the strong contributions and the strong investment returns that are driving that increase in the funded ratio up to the 82%. Next slide, please. This is the sources of change on the employer contribution rate. It's really the same story here. The assumptions, changes, and methods increased the employer contribution rate, and the investment gains helped offset that because of the reduction in the unfunded amortization rate. All the other sources through payroll increases and salary increases greater or less than assumed, and other changes in the demographics, they essentially all canceled out. So that 9 basis point increase in the employer contribution rate is largely being driven by the assumptions and the investment gains, which are offsetting on the employer contribution rate. Next slide, please. And I see there was one question there.
Nicole.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Chair. Slide 13. And excuse me, it's my 3rd year on the board. I still have questions. I'm still trying to understand it better each year. So on this, you say the PEPR plan, is equal to their plan's total normal cost rate. Could you explain a little bit more? What's their plan's total normal cost? What is that?
So the normal cost, that's the cost of benefits that are being earned by members that's allocated to the 1 year. And so because we know from year to year, members earn additional year of service and their salary goes up, so their benefit increases. And so we calculate what is the value of that increase that needs to be financed over that 1 year, and as a percentage of pay, and we calculate that as a percentage of pay. And then the member rate is a half of that rate.
So it's the entire plan G, for example, their member on that much benefit total.
Yes,
And
yeah, the total members, each member will, if you look at each member individually, they'd all have different rates, but in aggregate, so at this 9.22%, the plan as a whole, that was 18.44% was the total percentage of pay that was needed to finance those benefit increases for that year.
Yeah, in the other words, the incur liability for that group, basically, in the past year.
Yes, that's allocated for that year for the increase on the liability, yes.
Thank you for explaining. I care to ask this question because we have a large group of members that we serve, PEPR plans, they're the members that pay the highest percentage, and then they have less benefits. It's something that we'll be mindful of. And then I know it's not a decision of this board, but yeah, that's something I always look for. But thank you for explaining.
You're welcome.
I have a question to piggyback off of that. So as these members retire or start getting COLAs and such like that, will that be applied to this, or is that separate?
So the cost of the COLAs that those members will earn is built into that normal cost rate, because we're projecting that their future benefits will have that.
Got it. So you're already projecting that. It's already been captured.
It's already captured in there. And yes, so the member is then effectively paying for half of the cost of that COLA as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, please.
I was going to wait, but
Sorry, Troy.
so we changed the contribution rates because of the investment returns, and our returns were unusually good for the last few years. And of course, I'm keeping going back to the fact that we're at war now, so that may not be the case as much in the future. Are we looking at it on a year by year basis, or are we smoothing them out over 2-3 years? Because it may be, I don't. If we're trying to get to being fully funded, which I think it would be like the ultimate goal, keeping something the same as opposed to decreasing it and saying that we're going to increase it again later when we have a bad year seems to be a lot more volatile from the perspective of LA County employees and from the county. So are we doing it on a yearly basis? Are we doing it on a few year basis? How does that work?
For the amortization of the unfunded liability piece? Smoothing on the assets. So on the assets, we use this actuarial value of assets method. And so the purpose of that is to smooth out the ups and downs in the market value. So we do it over a 5-year period.
Okay.
And so it just helps to smooth out. So the asset value that we're using for funding is
Over
a lot
5 years.
smoother
Okay.
than if we were just using pure market value on a given date.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
All right, we move forward back to 17. Oh, 17.
70, yeah. Yep, there we go.
Perfect. Okay, this slide gets exactly at two of Trustee Fay's key points. One is, as Craig said, we smooth investment returns over 5 years. So we kind of know that we've kind of have something in reserve. We've had good reserves, but we haven't fully recognized them. So if we earn 7% every year going forward, that blue line indicates where the employer contribution rate would be. And you would see, we would project it would decrease over the next 5 years because then we'd be reflecting those good returns. So you see that drop would be from about 25.7 to about 23% of pay. But the two key points that I want to make on the slide are one, hey, we know things aren't going to go exactly as much as actuaries want things to go a certain way. It's not going to happen. Things are going to go up. They're going to go down. So this slide shows kind of examples. If we have good returns and bad returns, you can see where the contribution rate would go. But we're going to spend more time talking about this in June at the risk assessment. So when we do our risk assessment report, but the point is just reminding you, hey, this actual valuation is just a point in time measurement, and it's going to vary. And I'll get, and then the second point is the concern, like with everything that's going on right now, we might not see as good of a return as we have in recent years. Because we're smoothing, we do have some buffer, not a huge amount of buffer, but if we, return 4% next year, then we have good returns stay on a buffer that. So it's not necessarily going to cause a rate increase because we're kind of deferring good news that can offset against any future bad news.
Is this projected funding ratio, am I reading this right, that if we hit our 7% return over the next 10 years, we'd be projected at 96% funded?
Yeah, we'd be 96% funded in 10 years and 100% funded by 2039.
Okay. Pretty good. Yeah, let's talk Star Cola. Let's get this going again.
Assuming everything goes as planned.
Yes.
If you had another 28% year, it puts you almost right there. Obviously we defer that recognition, but you could also have another financial crisis. So, we don't know, but hopefully those things tend to kind of go up and down, and that's exactly the point of smoothing, because we know we're gonna have some good years and bad years, and we actually have made pretty steady progress in the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, moving to the last slide. So just summarizing recommendations that are in our evaluation report. Craig's talked about them. First of all is adopt new employer contribution rates for fiscal year July 1st, 2026. Craig outlined showed in detail later on in this in our appendix, and also shown in our evaluation report. As Craig said, the overall is 25.7% of pay, but that varies by plan. And so that is what needs to be adopted. Also, new member contribution rates, which Craig talked about those. They are shown in detail in Appendix D2 of our report. As Craig talked about, pretty much all of them went up a moderate amount on the member side. The one exception is General Plan G, which actually is your biggest group. They went down slightly, but they're all these changes are kind of in line with what we were projecting when we talked to you about the assumptions. So that concludes our report. We're happy to take any more questions, and we appreciate your questions thus far.
Yeah, a great presentation, and You ended 30 minutes sooner than I thought you would, so I appreciate that. That is a huge accomplishment for actuaries. So I love it.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, any questions that have not been asked?
And then trustee Kehoe, could we allow like 5 minutes for Brent from CABMAC? Also, he's got 2 slides, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's
Okay.
let's do that. Now tell us everything was right.
If we could go to slide 32, please.
Thank you. Yes, one of the things that I think is unique about LACERA is the involvement you have with regular review of the actuarial work. And I commend you for that. I mean, we appreciate it because it obviously gives us something to do too. And so we do appreciate it. But I think it is a valuable thing to help you know. And one of the key points I want to stress is we're not just simply here to check numbers. We're trying to do things independently, which I think is a big difference. For instance, this year, we adopted a new software, valuation software, so we could completely independently check the numbers and not just say we got the same number. That just means we programmed the computer the same way. But here we had to build a completely separate model, and it's a different structure that the software uses behind the scenes. So I think that gives you even a higher confidence. So the thing I want to stress is we're not just, saying, yep, you did that calculation right, you did that calculation right. Wasn't the proper calculation, but you did it right. That's the risk of just checking calculations. We're independently developing a model for what the liabilities are. And so we start back at the data level. We go through, we look at the data that LACERA sends to Milliman. We got a copy of that from LACERA as well. And basically said, do we get the same kind of data inputs that Milliman does? They obviously go back and forth and ask questions and clarify. And so we know that there's some of that going on. We say, yeah, the data being used is good. It's appropriate. It makes sense. We go through, we look at the calculations, and again, using a different kind of way of calculating, we come up with numbers that are very close. We wouldn't expect them to be identical because they have a slightly different way of doing it, but they should be close, and indeed they are. And so again, it gives that assurance of what Milliman is preparing is good. We even look at, at individuals just to make sure, sometimes things get masked when you have, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, but we actually, pick a handful of people who are unique and look at them as well to just confirm this. And again, everything lines up. And so we feel good about what's being done there. The next slide, we look at the report and kind of from 2 perspectives. One is just, there's some actuarial standards. I've got a checklist of 40 or 50 some things that are supposed to be in an actuarial report according to the actuarial standards, and go through and confirm that those are all in there, that this is being done according to actuarial standards. Hey, every actuary is different. We all have our preferences and styles. Sure, there's some things I do differently, but trying not to worry about those things so much. But just, are there some ideas? And it's becoming harder and harder to find anything I'd say, oh, this should be changed. But find a thing or two and say, you could do this differently. This might be interesting. Milliman has been really good about responding to those suggestions over the years, so it is getting harder to come up with new suggestions. But we do kind of, again, try to think through what would help this not just be right, but communicate the results in a better way so that it helps you have kind of an understanding of where things are going, and just that confidence that all these rates and things that are being developed are the appropriate rates to help you administer the system. So the bottom line, the actual evaluation is reasonable and accurate based on all the assumptions and methods used. Those were adopted by you a couple months ago. It was done by qualified actuaries, following all the actuarial standards of practice, all of that. So we believe this is a good report, communicating information that is useful. And so I think you can have that extra level of assurance, which we're glad to be able to give to you. Happy to answer any questions you may have. I know that my part normally isn't that interesting, but I'll answer a question if you have one.
Perfect. Any questions for CABMAC? Okay, seeing none, I believe we need to have a motion to adopt the staff recommendations. I'll go ahead and make that motion.
I'll second.
Moved and second. Let's please vote.
Thank you. Ms. Ginsburg?
Yes.
Ms. Me?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Mr. Perry? Ms. Martian?
Aye.
Mr. Gatto? Mr. Jones?
Aye.
And Ms. Langton? Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you. Excellent presentation and answered all our questions. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our reports. We have item 8A, which is our Board of Investments governance refresher. Let staff and our consultants get set up.
It's your idea or their idea? It was so good last meeting. Yeah, no, I didn't know if they were trying to tell us something.
All right. Good morning, Chair Kehoe, trustees. Today, we're bringing an item for your attention. Really, this is meant to be a level setting exercise as we move towards a new strategic framework for LACERA, as John highlighted in the CIO report. Considerable time is going to be spent polling the board, getting feedback, and then discussing some of the governance related and other items on LACERA's strategic direction at the board offsite in September. So this really just sets a background for where LACERA currently sits with its governance framework. I'm joined by Ashley Dunning from Nosman to cover some of the more technical legalistic fiduciary concepts here. So if we could just move forward 2 slides. There we go. I think we need to go back one. Sorry about that. There we go. So the overall objective is just to have this high level refresher and level set. The discussion outline is going to go, we're going to talk first about the governance framework for investments and then the evolution of that governance framework. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley and she's going to talk about trustee fiduciary duties and guiding considerations, and then also provide a review of LACERA's current framework. And then we're going to circle back to some of the exercise that was done in 2023 and just go over the market context and talk about some other peer investment models. Going forward to, I usually don't read slides, but bear with me on this one because I think there's an awful lot of very important information on this one. So the first one, governance is obviously a very critical component of an organization's success and failure in its missions. And the trustees of the Board of Investments are the ones who set all of the governance for LACERA and are ultimately responsible for paying all the benefits that we've heard about to all of these beneficiaries as they retire. So in the context of the pension system, trustees have a fiduciary duty of prudent care, and effective governance is critical for fulfilling that duty. Ashley is going to elaborate a little bit more on that later in the presentation. And so what overall is governance? It's a system of policies and processes utilized for direction setting, decision-making, oversight, and accountability for an organization. So all of those are really key. But I want to highlight, it should provide the framework that would be consistent, effective, and efficient for decision-making. So that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different organizations. This is a board-led organization that also relies on the expertise of an investment staff of 50 plus people. With those levels of interaction and complexity, the roles and responsibilities really need to be clearly defined throughout the organization. Of course, guardrails and internal controls should be in place. We just heard about risk management being important just for the accounting and actuarial. The same thing really applies across all of the investment landscape. A critical thing is to ensure transparency, understanding what's happening, especially from an oversight perspective. Trustees really need to have that full transparency. And then direct lines of accountability. It can't be muddled or unclear if something went wrong, who ultimately was responsible for that and who's to be held accountable. And also perhaps to elaborate a little more, just what might need to change within an organization in response to something that might be a negative event. And then it should be somewhat durable, but also responsive to the evolution of an organization and the operating environment. So one of the things from the last governance review was capital markets and investment strategies have just become so much more complex. If we went back in time to the 80s, everyone just had a simple stock and bond portfolio. It was probably mostly US Treasury bonds in the bond portfolio. Fast forward now to the asset allocation that we've all been discussing and we're going to talk about next year. 5 functional categories, each with 10 underlying different components to them, and then sub-strategies that get much more complex from there across both liquid and illiquid investments. So the complexity really has gone up dramatically. So overall, governance is also not an area where a one-size-fits-all approach, which is why we kind of put the periscope up and look around at what other pension plans are doing. Sometimes there are lessons to be learned, but you also have to caveat that with their different considerations in each regulatory jurisdiction. Legislative constraints are different, lots of things from system to system, but it is helpful to take a look around and find what fits for LACERA. And so with that, I will skip to the next slide. So one of the outputs of the governance review in 2023 was a refresh of LACERA's investment beliefs. And so this is what got added to the IPS at that point in time. It states that strong governance is critical for LACERA to achieve its investment objectives. Strategic direction setting by the board, prudent delegation of day-to-day portfolio management, and effective organizational controls and oversight are important components of strong governance. So right when you open up the IPS, some of the first things that anyone who's going to be looking in at LACERA will see immediately the investment beliefs highlighting the importance of governance to you all. Next slide. None of what you're seeing in here is new materials. A lot of this was presented in 2023, but some of it's also subsequent to 2023. So apologies for some of this being a refresher, but there were only a handful of members of the trustees that were involved in the first part of this process. So I think it is helpful to review it. On the right-hand side is the infinity loop, which you've all seen multiple times. This was a staff creation that I think really brilliantly captures the functions within LACERA and the interaction of the Board of Investments, their roles and responsibility, and those of staff, consultants, and others. A few guiding principles. We already talked about some of them, but over on the left-hand side, number 4, ensure checks and balances and risk management. So for you all to provide proper oversight, you have to understand what checks and balances are in place. And there's been a tremendous amount of work over the years at LACERA to ensure that those checks and balances are not just in place, but are also really consistent across the LACERA investment framework. And that wasn't necessarily the case back in further iterations. It's also really important to maximize efficiencies and enable timely execution of time-sensitive market opportunities. This governance framework that's been put in place allows for things like etched to be executed on, allows for things like secondary transactions to be adjudicated relatively quickly and added to the portfolio. So the timely execution is a very important cornerstone of the current governance framework. With that, maybe we can skip to the next slide. Overall here, this is just, highlighting the infinity loop once again. This was as it was originally portrayed. Everything relating to the board is on the left. And I think the key ones that we're going to be dealing with this year, the investment policy statement is the number one thing that the board is responsible for. It captures all of the governance and other considerations, all the roles and responsibilities, the risk parameters, all of that is captured within that very important document. And we'll be working on that again following the strategic asset allocation. The strategic asset allocation is going to start here in a couple of months. We've already heard about the importance of that from multiple different parties today, so I won't elaborate on that, but it is responsible for roughly, according to academic research, 90% of the outcomes LACERA is going to experience is because of the direction setting that the board provides during the strategic asset allocation process. So that's a very important one. The next one that'll immediately follow the strategic asset allocation is the asset class reviews. That's really where the guidelines are put in place, the implementation plans. Trustees are able to provide a tremendous amount of voice on where they're comfortable setting the guardrails and the checks and balances within each one of the underlying subcategories, including things like geographic exposures, sector exposures. You're going to be looking at the limits on what can be a re-up and what can be a co-investment. So setting all of those parameters is really key for risk management, and that falls squarely in the board's camp. And then the last one, it's labeled 7, but it's really, it's kind of oddly placed at 7 because it's also critically important, is continuous board oversight and monitoring. So you're going to see the performance report. As John highlighted, that's a report that's evolved over the years and become much more detailed. And Esme is going to get into a little bit highlighting how much is in that report and how much of it's changed. 160 pages of really deep dive performance material. So a tremendous amount of transparency there, but a really strong tool for you all to fulfill that very critical oversight and monitoring role. And that's an ongoing thing. Every quarter, those reports come to you and you have the opportunity to question what's in those. I'm not going to focus on the staff roles really here, and we can skip 2 ahead to the key roles of the Board of Investments. This is part of the BOI strategic work plan and initiatives that you all voted on in 26, more or less a repackaging of what you saw in the infinity loop, but just categorized a little bit differently with some more detail to just address the key roles of the Board of Investments. If we could skip 2 forward, I just want to highlight the evolution process a little bit. This wasn't just a one-time exercise. Makita has been working with LACERA since late 2015, early 2016. And so some of the governance work started with things like an IPS review that led to the introduction of investment beliefs. The introduction of a functional framework happened along the way. So just looking across the top. One of the key attributes of LACERA today is that everything is very harmonized and consistent across all of the different asset categories. If you rewound to 2016, LACERA was very siloed. So there were, very strong groups within each of the asset categories. They worked with independent subcommittees. There was a lot of back and forth, and each of one of them had different policies and procedures for improving investments, executing on things. So a tremendous amount of work over the last decade has been put into making sure that the framework is consistently applied across all of LACERA's investment divisions. And then just to highlight a couple of things down the bottom, specific to delegation. The CIO from a long time in the past has always had the ability to rebalance. And then I think the key one was in 2018, the ability to re-up, so you don't have to re-underwrite private equity managers every single time. We heard about an investment today where LACERA established a relationship with a fund 2 and is now investing in the fund 4 that led to a significant discount in the fee that LACERA pays. So building those relationships is critical, and not having to re-underwrite each one of those organizations allows for really efficient negotiations like that. Then obviously co-investments, which we talked about a little bit, just the nimbleness and the ability to take part in what are attractive investment opportunities, but also critically really attractively priced. Usually there's no management fee associated with those, and the carry is often sometimes somewhat less. So beneficial economics on both sides with the co-investments. And so that was the long process. And then just to review what happened in 23 on the next page, please. So similar to the way we do asset allocation, this was a multi-month, multi-step process that involved a lot of feedback from the board and involved a lot of discussion at multiple different meetings. So we've included hyperlinks. And while what you see here today is repackaging a lot of this, you can see that it was a very comprehensive process that's still really ongoing to this day. So while a vote was taken in November of 2023, There was an adoption of a new IPS. There was also a lot of policy documents that needed to further reflect that. And with each one of the structure reviews and various different things, LACERA's trustees are strengthening the guidelines and the governance that fits under this new framework that's evolved over time. So with that, maybe I'll pause, see if there are any thoughts or questions before I turn it over to Ashley from Nossaman to go over the fiduciary concepts.
Any questions? I see none. I think we're ready for the fiduciary.
Right, good. Good morning, members of the board. As my phone. Yes, good. If we can please advance to, oh, it's off.
So one more time.
There you go.
That's
Now can you hear me?
perfect.
Better. Okay, good. Good morning, members of the board. If we can advance the slides to the fiduciary framework or the framework for prudent fiduciary. There we go, fiduciary decision-making. What we have laid out here, what I've laid out here is the legal framework that governs fiduciaries of public plans such as LACERA. And some of this will be very familiar to you because we've talked about it in your fiduciary training and at various times in various contexts. But today what we're focusing on is a really important aspect of fiduciary governance, particularly for a plan of the size and complexity of LACERA's, with the investment portfolio of the size and complexity has been described today and as you all are very familiar with, in the context of delegation and what prudent fiduciaries do in that regard. But I start at the top, which is the California Constitution, which recites basic fiduciary principles. And they're also articulated in Searle, and that is that you are to discharge your duties with respect to the system with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence under the circumstances that are prevailing that a prudent person acting in like capacity and familiar with these matters would use in a conduct of an enterprise of like character and with like aims. What does that mean? That means you all come to this board as lay people with different levels of experience or expertise in your various areas. There's an understanding that you are not the expert as to all of the various things that need to be done by a LACERA prudently. The calculation of benefits, the determination of appropriate investments, the actuarial valuation process, but you were to educate yourself so that you can provide proper oversight and monitor as a fiduciary would for a similar system. So you are looking at similarly situated people who are doing similar things as you, or similarly situated agencies who are doing similar things as you, to establish these prudent parameters. Under that statement of the law, which is in the California Constitution, and that we sort of use the shorthand prudent public pension trustee as with experience standard, we've set forth some of the qualities or the elements of prudent decision-making by fiduciaries to think about, and ones that I think are particularly important for this discussion include leveraging of the expertise of this organization. So you've heard, this investment staff at LACERA is 50 plus, you said, I believe, led by a CIO who has the expertise that you have hired to run this portfolio. That is an important part of fiduciary risk management, to leverage that expertise. Defining roles and responsibilities, putting those into place and then respecting them so that you remain a policy level board that assigns the responsibilities of implementing your policies to those who have the expertise to do it prudently. And then your oversight is set forth. Some of the concepts within board oversight and monitoring are in that third bullet point. You're setting the strategy and policy. You are setting that forth in your investment policy statement and your SAA. You're receiving regular reports so that you can ask questions, but you're not inserting yourself into the day-to-day decision-making that is done consistent with your policies. Next slide, please. Going back to the law. So the law expressly authorizes you. That's the first question. Are you authorized to delegate certain of your responsibilities? And the answer is you most certainly are authorized to delegate. And that is both under SERL, the County Employees Retirement Law, which applies to LACERA specifically, as well as under the Uniform Prudent Investor Act and the Restatement Third of Trusts. And those are laws, those are authority that guide trustees of a variety of different types of trusts. But in California, courts have looked to the Restatement Third of Trust as an appropriate source of law for you. And that law also says that trustees may delegate investment and management functions as would be prudent under the circumstances. And these authorities are reflecting a trend that recognizes that delegation is available as a fiduciary tool to manage complex SERL and other investment trusts. So now we know you have to act like a fiduciary, prudently, providing oversight to the plan. You are permitted to delegate. And then we get to our third point here. And that is, there is also authority, well-established authority for the proposition that delegation by boards under certain circumstances is in fact warranted as a matter of law as well. And you can see that in this quoted and bolded statement from Restatement Third of Trusts, noting that it would be impractical for delegation decisions not to take into account the scale of a trustee's operations and the nature of the trustee's operating structure. Corporate trustees, and I'd say as well, public plan trustees necessarily act through their employees. Moreover, when you have a complex and novel investment, or you have a global portfolio of investments the way that LACERA does, trustees not only have the authority, but the restatement says have a duty to delegate these management activities. And so I would posit that in the context of the type of portfolio that you have at LACERA, the type of staff that you have, professional staff that you have at LACERA, and the complexity of the portfolio and the need to act efficiently, effectively, in a timely way, and with full information, that it creates a context where this aspect of fiduciary compliance is really important. I think about the work done on perhaps the other, you might say the other side of the house in the benefit side. One would never imagine or condone a trustee making a decision about how a benefit should be calculated. And similarly, should a trustee be involved in deciding which of the many investment managers should be selected within a particular framework that is in compliance with guidance that you have provided when it is staff who has done all of the due diligence on all of the various different opportunities that are available. Under this bullet point, we also note that effective delegation can be a key component of fiduciary risk management, which is maximizing your risk-adjusted return. That's another way of saying what I've been also positing here, which is fiduciary risk management assigns responsibility to the one who has the expertise, the time, the ability to engage in that responsibility prudently. Next slide, please. And then what does the board do in that context after having set policy? Very importantly, it continually provides oversight and monitoring and asks questions about performance, asks questions, if you have it, about why decisions were made. But but I would posit that individual trustees inserting themselves into one or more aspects of the day-to-day functioning or implementation of policies does create risk for an organization. And it does potentially diminish the fiduciary well-established process that has been developed to determine how to implement the policies the board has adopted. So this is the slide on oversight. It recites once again the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, which articulates how a trustee prudently delegates. It's through the selection of an agent who is appropriate to the task, establishing the scope and terms of the delegation consistent with the purposes and terms of the trust. And that's what you've been doing through your modifications of various policies that Tim described during his part of this presentation, and then periodically reviewing the performance and compliance with the terms of that delegation, which is exactly what you do when you receive your quarterly reports and other monthly reporting. And then this long list I won't read to you, but that's a pretty comprehensive description of the various ways in which you perform this responsibility of oversight and monitoring. Next slide, please. So now I'll turn more specifically to LACERA's current governance framework, although I've talked about it a little bit in this broader overview. If we can go ahead, please. As Tim described, the way in which you got to where you are today involved a very, in my judgment, a very prudent and deliberative process, multi-month, multi-year, in fact. And it led to a modification also of your various policies to reflect the roles and responsibilities that existed in the context of that delegation. So that was a very thorough and fiduciary process that you engaged in. Next slide, please. And what's come of that is what you have in the form of your policies and other materials that have been modified to reflect your beliefs in the importance of delegation to strong governance, fiduciary risk management, et cetera. And a lot of that is set forth on this slide specifically as to what the board does under the IPS and what is delegated to staff and third-party service providers, including your investment consultants. Next slide. And what is most critical with respect to all of that is that you have delegated to the appropriate people the responsibilities that are appropriate for them to have in light of their expertise and then in light of what they do as their day job. And you maintain your responsibility to provide oversight and to monitor, receive reports, ask questions, et cetera. And as I understand it, over the years, the delegation that was most thoroughly affirmed, granted in 2023 has been further improved over the last couple of years. And that's reflected in the materials that were provided to you as well. And I think that is the last of the slides on fiduciary duty. And I'm happy to take any questions before we go back to Tim if you have them.
Any questions actuary related? Not actuary, but fiduciary related.
I won't talk about the actuary.
Exactly, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. If we could go 2 slides forward to the national public plans. So this is the same peer group that we've used for multiple different exercises. We did this when we started looking at organizations using investment beliefs, which was an exercise in 2017, I believe. We used a similar peer group when looking at functional frameworks and discussing that change in 2018, and also used it for the delegation exercise in 2023. I think the really important part of this is LACERA is a really unique plan. It's a county plan, but it's far and away the largest county plan in the country. So your portfolio, your size of staff, your resources are going to look much more like these state level plans of a much larger size than some of the other peers that you might see in the county peer universe. We do highlight a couple of those. So here is just the very largest of the national public plans. We refreshed the plan size, tried to capture just their defined benefit assets. A lot of these organizations also oversee multiple different pools of assets. So we did try to limit it to the defined benefit plans. And we looked very narrowly at this delegation issue because that was what the exercise was in 2023. And as you can see, all of the largest plans do delegate. And then the notes there, what's interesting here is all of this is publicly available material. So we had to manually go and source this, look up all of their policy documents, review all those things to come to some of these conclusions. But I think the thing that jumps out is there are a couple of the plans that actually have a separate governance policy or a policy that really talks about the delegation of authority. And most of your practice and other peers also have that throughout their IPSs. Which is how you captured it. And then just going to the next page, a slightly smaller peer group. All of these folks have grown quite nicely. This is the plans from 60 to 100 on the next page. Here you can see a little bit of differentiation in the models. You can see there's one plan that has partial, where there is some additional oversight for private market investments. I will note that there's a caveat on that. So the private market subcommittee reviews new commitments to new firms, and they have to be, and then for re-ups under $750 million or over $750 million. So it is still very, very delegated, but for new relationships, there's a process that it goes through. And then there's one no. And previously, the state of Oregon was in a delegation process, a governance review process, and they also decided to delegate across all asset categories, whereas previously they had that partial model as well. And then just going to the California public plans, we obviously have CalPERS and CalSTRS and UC retirement systems, which are very large. But then we did look at a number of the other county plans. We picked some of the largest just to look at the models. A little bit more mixed here, but you definitely
Is there
see
a different slide?
Oh, sorry about that. Yes. Select California plans. So PERS, STRS, and UC retirement are far and away the largest, but then we do have the county plans down at the bottom. And another city plan as well. So you can see, or two other city plans. So you can see there is some variation there, but you're starting to deal with different sizes of organizations and resources and things along those lines. So just a refresh of the exercise we did in 2023. And we have
how does that
summary
compare
page.
to 2023? Have we seen, we're seeing a ongoing shift to that 400?
Yeah, so the only one that moved was Oregon, and it moved in the fully delegated direction, but that's the only change that's occurred over that time frame. And so we have a summary slide. I think we hit a lot of the key points, so maybe we'll just land it there and then open it up for any of your questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the trustees? Please.
What's the size of LACERS and LA Fire and Police? Like, what's the size of their investment teams?
Yeah, I think they're in the 20 or 30 range, but we have it on the page. Yeah. Their investment teams.
Yeah, their investment teams.
Yeah, 10 to 20 maybe
That-
would
that-
be about the size, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Cool.
John, 10 to 20? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, and I think it's good to bring us to level set us and put us all on the same page. So I know this was a lot of effort to put this together, but but it was very important for all of us, and it sets us up for our offsite. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and move on to item B, which is going to be our LACERA Total Fund Quarterly Board Book. And this will be our quarterly performance.
All right. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and trustees. I'm joined by my two portfolio analytics colleagues, Catherine Ton and Jesse Gonzalez to my left. Today, we'll present on the total funds performance results for the quarter ended December 31st. And then after that, we'll do the same for the OPEB Master Trust. As a reminder, we present on performance results twice a year, once in March and once in September at the offsite, to cover calendar year end and fiscal year end periods respectively. Today's presentation will differ slightly from our usual approach. Before reviewing results for both plans, we'll first walk through the structure and purpose of LACERA's quarterly performance report, which is attachment 2, and orient trustees to the anatomy of the book. This overview is intended for board education and responds to questions raised by a few trustees regarding components of the performance reports. So my overview comments will also apply to OPEB. So when we get to that agenda item, we can just dive directly into the results. This quarterly book, when combined with total fund and OPEB, is over 200 pages long. I know there was references to 160, that's total fund, but in total, it's over 200 pages long. It brings together the 4 verticals the portfolio analytics team oversees, which is performance, risk, compliance, and operations. The quarterly book is intended as a tool so that trustees can monitor how the investment program is performing, how risks are evolving, and how the portfolio remains aligned with board policy. Our objective throughout the report is to provide trustees with a level of transparency that allows the board to see not just the outcomes, but the underlying drivers of those outcomes across the entire portfolio. The next 2 slides show how the quarterly book and our analytics capabilities have evolved over time. As the portfolio has grown more complex, particularly with the expansion of private markets, our reporting framework has evolved alongside it to ensure that the board maintains a clear line of sight into portfolio risks and performance. The middle column highlights the significant enhancements to reporting, including deeper analytics, expanded coverage, and more structured oversight. At the same time, there have been major advances in our underlying technology, shown in the right-hand column, which have enabled these improvements and elevated the quality of reporting. Over the past several years, we've expanded both the depth of the data and the tools incorporated into the reporting process. For example, in 2021, we onboarded our total fund and OPEB to Solovis, which is an analytics platform. We then took the opportunity to completely redesign our quarterly book. We enhanced reporting for private markets, added dedicated sections for private equity, hedge funds, real assets, and credit. We refined reporting for the emerging manager programs. We included a risk analysis for each functional category and added a securities lending dashboard.
Patrick?
Yeah, just real quick, I just wanted to just bring to the attention of the board here that in each of the administrative budget processes, there's always a technology line item. And it's typically the one that's slightly growing that we vote for. This is what we pay for, right? So these tools that allow us to get the better information, sometimes it's hard to connect the spending to the results. So this is just a classic example. So I appreciate the column and the connection to that part of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Jones. So as this timeline continues to current date, it shows that we have further refined the book by including additional risk metrics, adding dedicated pages for the cash overlay and currency hedging programs, and importantly, redesigning the compliance section to further align with board policy and guidelines, as we just had a discussion on the governance framework and the evolution of our process. The key takeaway, or Didier said punchline, I like punchline, is that this is not the same quarterly book that we had 5 years ago. It reflects a deliberate evolution to support more transparent and effective board oversight as the portfolio has grown in size and complexity. And now I'll dive deeper into the various components, starting with performance. So I'll reference page numbers throughout the overview, but they do apply to the total fund compared to instead of the OPEB trust book. So this section, which begins on page 6 of the quarterly book, explains how we report performance for oversight purposes. In simple terms, performance shows how much the portfolio grew or declined over different time periods. We compare results to the board-approved policy benchmarks and the actuarial rate of return. Throughout the report, performance is primarily shown using time-weighted returns, which is the industry standard. In private markets, you'll also see internal rates of returns, or IRRs. IRRs are commonly used for private market investments because they reflect the timing of cash flows, when capital is invested and when it is returned. You'll also see contribution to return and attribution sections. These help explain what drove performance and which parts of the portfolio helped or hurt overall results. For private markets, the quarterly report provides deeper analysis, including multiples, PMEs or private market equivalents, cash flows, and vintage year performance. So the two tiles that you see on the bottom of this page are snapshots from the book that show this information for private equity, for example. Now, earlier in John Grable, CIO comments, he mentioned that the CIO report is more of a flash report. So it's important to note that this quarterly book is a complete and comprehensive report, given that private assets are valued quarterly. So I just want to ensure that there's that distinction between the two different reports. So now we dive into risk. While the prior section focused on performance outcomes, this section looks at how much risk the portfolio took to achieve those results and how resilient the portfolio is. The risk pages follow the performance pages in each portfolio's respective section and includes several key measures, including volatility, which shows how much returns typically move up and down, value at risk or VAR, which estimates potential losses in stress markets, and tracking error, which measures how much the portfolio differs from its benchmark. We also report on risk allocation, which shows where risk is concentrated. For example, growth represents less than half of the total fund's market value, yet it contributes nearly 80% of the portfolio's overall risk. Finally, stress tests, which are included on page 17 of the quarterly book, show how the portfolio might behave under different market scenarios, both at the total fund level and at the functional portfolio level, helping assess overall resilience. So this compliance section, which starts on page 123 of the quarterly book, is critical because it directly supports LACERA's governance structure. This section provides a formal recurring review of how the investment program aligns with board decisions. The report tracks compliance across several key areas, including total fund policy targets and policy ranges, asset category guidelines such as limits on geography, sector, and concentration, exceptions and advisories, including when something is outside or approaching guidelines, and comments on remediation. This section represents governance in action. It creates a clear line of sight from board policy to ongoing monitoring, reinforcing both fiduciary and operational oversight. This section highlights several strategic programs that support performance, operations, and infrastructure. These programs cut across multiple asset classes and play an important role in shaping total fund outcomes. These include the cash overlay, emerging manager programs, proxy voting, and securities lending. The quarterly report provides the key information needed for effective oversight over each program. For example, the cash overlay section, which is on page 117, shows both gains and its impact on portfolio risk. You'll see that the cash overlay has generated over $620 million in gains since inception in 2019 and has reduced total fund tracking error, or active risk, by roughly 50%, improving efficiency while remaining aligned with board policy targets. Overall, this section provides transparency and accountability for programs that operate across the portfolio and are critical to total fund implementation and governance. Because the performance operations and conduct of our external managers directly affect the investment program, we use standardized manager scorecards to evaluate managers across multiple dimensions, not just investment returns. In total, we apply this framework to over 175 manager line items, allowing for the consistent and repeatable oversight. The scorecard section, which starts on page 140 of the book, is included because manager selection and monitoring are core fiduciary responsibilities. Each scorecard evaluates managers across several key areas: performance relative to benchmark and peers, organization and operations, such as firm stability and risk management, ESG considerations, including policies and stewardship integration, partnerships such as communication and alignment, and fees and terms relative to their peers. The scorecard provides consistent, repeatable oversight, again, rather than relying on performance alone.
Question on the performance thing. So I appreciate the external view that we get from here, but internally, as you're monitoring, I imagine there's a layer of data that maybe allows you to segment that based on this data, maybe some additional data that you get, that there's a dozen managers that warrant additional scrutiny, right? Or is the data that we're getting real time enough? And do we have it in a way that we can look at it and say, hey, 3/4 of declining performance, or I saw the update that we got about one of the managers from one of the funds leaving, and just kind of an update, but do we have a mathematical model yet that allows us to kind of take a look at which partners? Because when I look at it, I see the scores and they're kind of independent in the column. Like I still don't know what to do with it. It's nice to have it. But internally, are you able to draw further distinctions for additional scrutiny or things of that nature that's out there? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Jones, for the question. So maybe I'll just respond to just the timing on what you see in these manager scorecards. These are dynamic scorecards. The teams in the various functional categories are constantly assessing managers in each one of these pillars. We report this on a quarterly basis, though, in the quarterly report. We do have certain sections that does indicate where things have changed. So if you look in the middle 3 columns, that's where we show if it's changed from quarter to quarter based on our assessment. But yes, internally, we do constantly, this is just a manager scorecard, which kind of shows what we display, but there's a lot that goes into the calculations and considerations, both on a qualitative and quantitative metric on how we assess each one of our managers. But yes, to your question, yes, this is constantly being monitored internally.
Yeah, because I know Cheryl had mentioned earlier in the real assets presentation that, for example, and I can't remember if it was trustee me or trustee Fay that asked the question, and she had mentioned that within the data center category, we've recently revisited with our managers to figure out what the level of our exposure and data is. So I assume, I don't know if that's a fundamentalist analysis that she's kind of says, hey, we're just kind of looking to see what you guys are thinking, or was there some data-driven thing that says, hey, based on the sub-strategy and our exposures in this area, we should revisit with our managers because we got some insight that suggests that we should as part of our risk management. I just wasn't sure how proactive the data is versus we're just relying on the experience of Cheryl and the team to say, hey, this is worth making sure our managers communicate to us, their marks in this area. Does that make sense?
If I understand your question correctly, is it related to how PA oversees this versus the functional teams and how live it is?
Well, I guess part of it will eventually lead into what degree, speaking of investment in technology, we begin to use AI, but is there anything that proactively allows us to risk assess managers based on the data and then allow us to intervene, again, proactively about performance or other factors that we know are affecting the portfolio? So just curious.
Yes, maybe I can answer your question.
And I don't mean to put you in the
this
hot
way.
seat. It's not a firm answer. I'm just curious how we're thinking about it, kind of like internally.
Appreciate the question. So maybe just to give some context, these scores are scored by each functional team on an ongoing basis. We report them quarterly. However, to your question on insight, I think getting to the kind of looking ahead slide, which is I think the next slide, is as we advance our risk platform, we're currently onboarding components of our risk system to add certain capabilities, especially in private markets. That will give us additional transparency into our investments throughout the portfolio, in the more complex components of the portfolio. Once we do that onboarding and have additional capabilities, I think it will further allow us to get more portfolio insights on a real-time basis. We do have it for a lot of the portfolio currently, but as we advance our technology, I think that will assist with, I think the comment that I think you're mentioning is just being more proactive.
Yeah, great answer. And I know that we're also shifting the overall, I think our current alternative investment slots around 45% or so, 46% or so. So also just thinking about the level of visibility that we have where the risks of bad marks or slow marks may be hidden for a while, and to the degree that we have the ability to predictively maybe look into that. And I'm thinking particularly, and I think Trustee Me mentioned this last meeting too, and you've heard me beat on it, which is the private credit area, right? Like when do we have the ability to look at other data going on and kind of get an idea of some risk through there? So tough set of questions. Appreciate it. I know Esme and her group, I'm very impressed by the portfolio analytics team. Just wanted to get a sense of what you guys are thinking or how you're thinking about it. Do we have the data to do that? But thanks, John. Obviously.
Through the chair, if Kwok can phone a friend.
He's actually hanging out there for a minute. I appreciated the teaching moment, but yeah.
And for the benefit of the trustees, I think one way to think about this is the book showed the quarterly performance book, and a lot of the reports that the board gets focus on different ways of looking at the portfolio. The manager scorecard obviously does it through the lens of our business partners. I would say that maybe the biggest change that we've made, if we don't have to change the slide, but when you go back through the arc of time and look at the changes in the evolution of the quarterly performance book and the different technologies, is that we moved from a monthly close of the book and of the portfolio where we struck a monthly NAV to now we have a daily NAV that we strike and make decisions and rebalance based upon the daily look of the portfolio, combined with the transparency, not that and once again, this is going way back, but we used to look at things such as private equity or real estate as a single line, not even managers, that real estate was one line item. Private equity was one line item. Now we try to look at the underlying investments and try to consistently get more and more granular such that those portfolio insights and then how people and process harness technology to, you can't look into the future, but to in near real time make decisions. The combination of more granular information, both from an investment perspective and a time perspective, is allow us hopefully to do a Trustee Jones with kind of what you're leaning into a little bit.
I appreciate that.
Can I add a question or a thought? I think because that all makes sense. Everything that's on this slide in particular is in response to what has already happened. Everything on, and if there's been any change from what has happened more recently. And the idea of a book and a PDF in particular is it's a pain to put together, I know, but also it takes a lot of time to try to format. And this is not saying that we need this for right now, but something to think about for the future. If we just had like an interface, like a web interface, we just log in and then it only needs to be updated once a quarter, that's fine. But then all the details could actually all be in there. So then that would also allow us to aggregate the future stuff from the AI stuff that we could take from what might be affecting private credit and allow us to see all that at one time and then make it much easier for the whole team because it's like you just get the data's there once and then we get to see it much easier. So as opposed to having to put it together every quarter. So just an idea.
Thank you. And then that brings me to my final slide before handing it over to Catherine. But this slide shows areas where we'll continue to advance the analytical framework that supports board oversight of the total fund and OPEB over the coming year. These initiatives align with the board approved annual strategic plan. And then just that one area that I just want to emphasize is that enhanced risk analysis. So as we continue to build out the risk capabilities, we plan to provide trustee education on the role and implementation of a risk budget as we advance our capabilities. This represents an important next step in strengthening risk governance and clarifying how overall portfolio risk is set, monitored, and overseen. So again, overall, our goal is to continually refine the tools available to the board, ensuring that oversight keeps pace with the growing sophistication of the portfolio. And with that, I'll hand it over to Catherine. Thanks.
Thanks, Kwok. And good afternoon, Chair Kehoe and trustees. Today's presentation provides an overview of the total fund's performance, risk profile, and compliance with board-approved policies. We'll begin on slide 14, which shows the total fund's actual versus policy asset allocation across each functional category. We closed the calendar year with a total market value of $89.4 billion, an increase of $1.5 billion from the prior quarter and $8.2 billion year over year. The portfolio remains near policy targets due to ongoing rebalancing activity. On this slide, the contribution to return shows how each functional category affects the overall performance of the total fund. The figures are net of fees and feature quarter end results on the left-hand side and calendar year results on the right-hand side. Both periods delivered positive returns, 2.1% for the quarter and 11.9% for the calendar year. The waterfall charts show how each functional category contributes to the total fund's overall return. As you can see, the portfolio is working as intended, with growth continuing to drive long-term returns. For example, calendar year to date, growth contributes 7.7% to the 11.9% total fund return. As Kwok mentioned in his overview, slide 16 explains return attribution, or what drove the total fund's performance for the quarter and calendar year-to-date periods. There are two performance drivers. One, allocation effect, or how much we hold in each asset category versus the policy benchmark. And 2, selection effect, how the underlying investments performed versus their benchmark. Moving to the bottom 2 tables, quarter to date, the total fund trailed the benchmark by 1%, driven largely by growth assets. Calendar year to date, on the right-hand side, the total fund had a strong return, up almost 12% on a standalone basis, but trailing the benchmark on a relative basis. As John has mentioned in his prior month's CIO report, the total fund performance is well above capital market expectations. While the total fund may be trailing the policy benchmark for this period, this is something that we're actively monitoring as we continue to review our strategic asset allocation and benchmarks. It is also important to remember that short-term market swings are expected, which is why we stay focused on long-term performance and maintaining a well-diversified portfolio. This slide gives you a visual breakdown of how the total fund has grown over time. The graph shows how the total fund, shown in the blue line, compares to 2 reference points, how the policy benchmark performed, shown by the gray line, and the 7% actuarial target, shown by the yellow line. As you can see, trustees, the total fund has outperformed the benchmark by 5.5% and the actuarial target by 8.6%. Over the past 5 years, cumulative net returns for the total fund have outperformed the benchmark by approximately $5 billion and the actuarial target by almost $8 billion. Despite normal market swings, this long-term performance shows the strength and discipline of our investment approach. I'll now walk through the overall risk profile for the total fund. In the top left corner of the slide is a measure we call value at risk, or VAR, which measures how much the portfolio could lose within a given year. For the total fund, the VAR is 13.2%, meaning that 95% of the time, we would not expect losses to exceed this amount within the next year. The diagram in the upper right shows that the portfolio is well diversified, with a mix of active and passive strategies, public and private investments, and approximately 70% of the portfolio exposure in the US and 30% in non-US markets. The bottom left shows forecast volatility, which measures how much the portfolio returns can fluctuate in a given year. The total fund volatility is very close to the benchmark, which shows that the portfolio is being kept in line with expectations. Another measure shown here is active risk, which reflects how much risk comes from decisions that differ from the benchmark. Overall, active risk is in line with expectations. Consistent with what we saw in the return attribution results, most of the risk comes from the selection effect. Moving to the donut, growth assets are the largest contributors to risk, as expected. The bar chart to the right shows how diversification works in practice. While credit and risk reduction make up 1/3 of the total fund today, they contribute little to overall risk. Again, this shows how the asset mix is working as intended, with diversification helping to limit risk. With that, I'll hand it over to Jesse to cover compliance.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and trustees. I'll provide a quarterly snapshot of total fund compliance. As Kwok mentioned earlier, this section is critical for board oversight as it serves as a primary reporting mechanism for the fund's adherence to board-approved investment guidelines. Beginning at the top of the page with the pie and bar charts, we highlight strategic asset allocation compared to board-approved weights as of quarter end. Notably, all categories are within their acceptable variance. For further details, we move to the middle of the page where we highlight the number of advisories and exceptions by functional category, which is then further broken down by sub-asset class. For your reference, advisories are for informational purposes only, and they serve as a monitoring measure that do not indicate compliance exceptions. Exceptions refer to instances where investment activity may temporarily fall outside of board-approved and established guidelines. As an example, The exceptions identified in this section are generally associated with initial ramp-up phases of emerging manager programs. Such exceptions are monitored and resolved in a timely manner, restoring compliance with board-approved guidelines. More detailed information on investment operations and total fund proxy voting activity is available in the full quarterly report. This concludes the total fund presentation. With that, we can stand for questions.
Any questions? I see none. Thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We know it's a lot.
We do have another agenda item, which is for the OPEB trust.
Yep, I was gonna move us to item C, which is the OPEB trust, and you can go ahead and roll right into that.
Thank you. We do have some overview slides here, but I'll skip the overview just because we gave it for the total fund. And so we can just transition to Catherine to give the results.
Great, thanks, Kwok. If we can pull up the presentation, please, for OPEB. Let me start with OPEB's asset allocation using the same format as the pension. At the end of the calendar year, OPEB had a total market value of $5.7 billion. OPEB reached a notable high watermark for the calendar year, an increase of $175 million from the prior quarter and $1.3 billion year over year. OPEB's asset allocation were close to policy targets with no major deviations across asset categories. Slide 7 shows how each part of the portfolio contributed to overall performance from a quarter to date and calendar year to date perspective. OPEB posted strong absolute returns in both periods, 1.8% for the quarter and 13.6% for the calendar year. The largest contributor was the global equity portfolio in growth. It contributed 9.8% to the 13.6% calendar year-to-date return. This slide shows return attribution and why OPEB performed the way that it did. Starting from the left, for the quarter, OPEB trailed the benchmark by 60 basis points, mainly driven by investment choices in growth and real assets. Moving to the right, for the calendar year, OPEB performance was strong overall, but slightly trailed the benchmark by 30 basis points. Growth and credit investments outperformed the benchmarks, but real assets underperformed, offsetting some of those gains. Similar to the pension, over the past 5 years, OPEB has added meaningful value, approximately $118 million above its benchmark and $342 million beyond its actuarial target. Having reviewed performance, I'll now turn to the OPEB's risk profile. Overall, the portfolio's risk is well diversified and in line with expectations. OPEB is mainly invested in public and passive strategies with a focus on US investments as we continue to build out our private markets program. Moving to the bottom right, left, forecast volatility is comparable to the benchmark. Because OPEB is largely invested in passive strategies, it does have a lower active risk, as expected. Similar to the pension, the donut shows how growth investments are the main contributors to risk. And finally, the bar charts to the right highlight the benefits of diversification. The credit and risk reduction strategies account for roughly 40% of the portfolio, but contribute about 1/3 to overall risk, showing that the board-approved asset allocation is working as designed. And I'll now hand it over to Jesse to cover compliance.
Thank you, Catherine. This slide closely mirrors what we reviewed earlier at the total fund level, and it provides a focused snapshot of compliance for the OPEB trust as of quarter end. At the top of the page, we once again show the OPEB portfolio allocations that are fully in compliance with within their respective asset class policy bands. Now moving to the middle of the page, we highlight all relevant advisors and exceptions. As noted, these items remain within board-approved ranges and are monitored as part of our ongoing oversight process. The OPEB trust organizes reporting between public and private markets. And in line with the total fund, exceptions identified are attributable to the ramp up of the private market program as additional capital is deployed. Additional information on investment operations and proxy voting activity can be found in the full OPEB report. And that concludes our prepared remarks. We can stand for questions. Thank you.
Any, Nicole?
Thank you, Chair, and
Please
thank you
go
for the
ahead.
presentation. I love the report. Like John said last meeting, I do find the assets class performance right down there. I guess I just have to be patient. Each quarter you will wait a few months to see it. But thank you for presentation. My question is, help me understand this, educate me on this, right? I always hear diversification reduce risk, and then our pension fund is more diversified than the OPEB fund, right? We have private equity, like when the OPEB fund doesn't have. But when I look at the volatility comparing the two funds, it looks like OPEB is having 14.9%, while the pensions having 13.2%. So why is it the other way around? I would assume the more diversified pension would have less risk, but it looks like.
Excuse me, are you referring to the value at risk figures or the forecast volatility? In terms of the forecast volatility shows how much the returns could fluctuate in a given year. And for the total fund, it is higher than for the OPEB trust.
Oh, actually, I think I misunderstood it. It is higher, so it's less diversified. It's 14.9. It's higher than the other one, 13.2.
Yes.
So it did confirm that diversification reduced risk.
Yeah.
Excellent. I just want that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
That's all my question.
Thank you. Hello, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I have a question, and I'm sorry to even ask it at this point, but I just don't know. I know we always discuss that the OPEB isn't a separate trust. Is the OPEB amount included in the 89.4 billion? No, so, I mean, we always say it's not a separate trust, or it's not
It is-
separate.
it is separate.
No,
Yeah,
wait.
it is separate.
Didn't we say that it's not separated though? Haven't I heard somebody say that?
The money's commingled as far as investment goes, but we're calculating it out separate. Right?
Right, so that's what I wanted to know, if it was, so it's all in one fund, but it's a separate trust. It's not all in one fund?
OPEB is invested separately.
Yeah.
Through the-
Oh, I was of the understanding that, okay, thank you.
But the participants in the OPEB plan, the county, the courts, and LACERA, all that money is invested together. It's unitized.
That's so, say if we're investing in S&P 500, it's all together, but we're calculating out the growth separately, right? It's not like we have a separate account
We've set
sitting.
for the pension and OPEB are two distinct entities, different contracts, different accounts, they're different managers that we partner with. Within OPEB, for the different participants, the different employers, that's all commingled together.
Got it.
But not that the two plans are not together.
So they are completely walled off and
Yes.
separate.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
I always wondered how you would keep it separate otherwise, and I couldn't understand how, because I always heard that it was commingled, but I guess it was the company or the agencies that are commingled, not the accounts. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Okay, I see no further questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. Actually, I take that
Sorry,
back, Eileen.
sorry. So then we have more than 89
Yes,
million.
yes,
Okay,
that's the
so why aren't we?
96.6.
Oh, that's the 96.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
combined.
Okay, never
We're
mind.
trying to get to that 100 billion.
Got it,
so
got it,
no
got it.
pressure, no
Okay,
pressure.
okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. Never mind.
Okay, well, thank you once again for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, items D through G are all information only. Any requests to speak about any of them? I hear none, and we'll move on to items for staff review. I don't believe we've given anything to staff. And items for future agenda. This is your opportunity to ask for items to be agendized in the future. I hear none, so let's go to the order.
Miss Me?
Sure, I'm gonna start. I do have something I want to share, I went to PPI conference a couple weeks ago. It was excellent learning there, like learning from other funds, other manager, and what worried them, and then of course they see different funds have different performance, and I asked different question, and then learn that their allocation is different, depending on if they have private equity or not, and then the performance really different because in the recent couple of years, right, global equities is really performing. So, and then everyone there do have the same struggle, of explaining the private equity below benchmark performance. So the team, the CIO there in the room, is like, how do we explain this to the public, to the trustee? It is below benchmark. However, the teams indeed doing an excellent job, So, and without, without help, like if without understanding the public and the trustee, and then it's the misleading, to the staff, like they're like, they should be, like they're doing a good job. They should be, given this, not the other way around. So retaining staff, right, is also the other issue for that, because the private equity takes a long time to realize. And then if you have staff that are doing a great job in the first few years, they don't even see the result, right? So how do you make sure they understand that they're doing a great job, right? So that's what we learned from the whole group there. Is global, struggle, with the private equity benchmark using the global equity, and when global equity is doing so good, so it shows that it's below performance. So I know that our team has been doing an excellent job, and then like some of the pension there, like the team was trying to avoid explaining it, the benchmark complication. I would say don't avoid explaining it. We are public pension fund. We are here for the members, right? 200,000 members. We need to understand it. So don't avoid explaining it, because it only cause more question. If it's something that looks worrisome, let's explain it, right? Let's explain to everyone that need to understand. I'll share a quick story about me as a civil engineer, right? I do projects like massive construction project out there that, like doing like huge excavation and drilling a well on the slope side. And then residents would come to my community meeting, ask about the project. And then I have to learn how to explain engineering to non-engineering people, like in a way that they can understand, so that they support the project, right? So that's similar here. We're a public facing entity. We need to explain what we need to explain to the public. That's one thing. I think like unlike the resident to my project can show up to ask question on their behalf, right? Is the project going to danger my house on the other side of the slope? Our member not here to ask a question. So our member rely on 9 of us, to ask question on their behalf. So if something that's worrisome, that then we think is worrisome, then we should ask question so that they don't have to worry. I think it's part of our job as trustee to provide that oversight on the investment of, the pension fund for 200,000 people. They count on us to do the job, right? So the other thing is, I would say for new trustee, I think every new trustee come here, it's very healthy to ask question. Every question that you have, question that you're not sure on policy and process, those things. It's healthy, it's important to ask. The chances, if you're not sure of something, you have question about something, likely other people have the same question, and even more likely, our members out there have the same question. So it's important that we continue to ask questions, have the learning, and then to our team, to our wonderful CIO and team, you guys have done an amazing job educating us. When I joined 2 years ago, I asked John, could you, put a little bit more effort into educating this board, because we have a lot of new trustees. And then you guys did indeed put into effort and did an excellent job educating us. What I ask of you is continue doing that, continue to educate us, explain everything that you can in the best way to build that trust with the board, with the trustee, and build that confidence also with the public, So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Gata. Ms. Martin, Mr. Jones, Mr. Fay.
Am I allowed to give John his kudos?
Absolutely.
The chief internal auditor.
Oh, no.
No, John.
I'm not the chief.
Yeah. I couldn't listen. I was like, do you have your mic on? But no. Yes.
All right, sorry. Then I want to give John congratulations for being elected to the board of CII then.
Ms. Ginsburg? Ms. Langton? Yeah.
So I knew that Linda's birthday was coming up. And today I asked her, hey, I know your birthday's coming up. When is it? And she said tomorrow. So I was like, oh God. So last year it was on the day of the board hearing or board meeting. Sorry, I'm so lawyerly stuck in hearings. And so while I was sitting here after she told me, I asked ChatGPT to write her a poem, a birthday poem. So the first one was way too long. I'm like, no, shorter. Next one wasn't flattering enough. I'm like, I like the first format better, but it needs to be more flattering. Then they give me a third one and I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to cut my losses and listen to the meeting. So here's what it came up with. And I think it's totally accurate. Today we pause our busy pace to thank you for your steady grace. With thoughtful care and quiet skill, you keep all moving actions still. 100 details pass each day because you guide them on their way. With calm, with wisdom, and with heart, you always ensure you do your part. Your excellence lifts everyone near. Your kindness sets the tone each year. So today we celebrate you and all the thoughtful things you do. Happy birthday, Linda.
Thank you.
And congratulations, John. I just heard that you got appointed to the, thank you.
Through the chairs, there a poem?
I just found it.
Who wants to go first?
I'll
Okay.
go briefly, John.
Okay.
So for the record, we do not have a dual chief internal auditor CIO. role.
Okay.
No, but with that said, I did want to, obviously in closed session, the BOI appointed Leisha Collins as well as the BOR to serve as LACERA's next chief internal auditor. So in a public forum, I want to congratulate Leisha Collins.
Mr. Grateful?
Thank you and happy pre-birthday, Linda. I want to acknowledge someone also, and this may sound, I'll start it as peak pandering. So I want to acknowledge someone whose first name is Sean, spelled S-H-A-W-N, last initial K, but it's not our chair. I want to introduce Sean Kim, who is a new senior financial analyst who joined the investment division recently. Great initials and great spelling of his
Great, concur,
first name.
yeah.
Sean joins us most recently from Capital Group. He has a tremendous background across the investment industry, significant, and this goes to the questions that were being asked by Trustee Jones. Sean is in our portfolio analytics group, and Sean has a significant background in analytics and how to use different systems and software. So hopefully we can be not predictive, but we can be as analytical as possible. One thing I will say, Sean has 2 master's degrees, an MBA and a master's of science in industrial engineering. And I think something that I've observed at LACERA with each new hire is that there's an aspect of each person not getting better, because we have a really fantastic group of people, but each person being as good or better. And I think that there's an aspect of momentum, of a magnet, that as our team continues to continuously get better, the next person who joins us is that much better. And so I think that there's this aspect of continuous improvement that has me really optimistic about the future state of our team. And the one thing that I don't worry about is the future of our team, because I think that it really is outstanding. And Sean Kim is just the latest example of that. So welcome to the team, Sean.
Thank you. And we keep hiring overachievers, which I love. So let's keep it going. So, and Eileen, next time we'll up and we'll do Suno, which is an AI music generator, and you're gonna create a song, a birthday song for Linda. Yeah. Well, Suno. Yeah. Well, yeah. it's scary. Look at it. But you never have to write a love song again. And a well-fought campaign, John, for winning the CII vote. I'm very happy for you and for our organization and keeping us in the forefront of everything going on out there. So I appreciate that. I will happily take a motion for adjournment. So moved.